Coming up on this week's show, Scott Coatsworth talks about his new novel, The Stark Divide, plus we unveil a terrific new giveaway just in time for the holidays.
Welcome to the Big Gay Fiction Podcast, the show for readers and writers of gay romance fiction. If you can read it, write it, watch it, or listen to it, these two guys are going to talk about it. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Adams and Will Knaus.
Welcome to episode 110 of Jeff and Will's Big Gay Fiction Podcast. I'm Jeff from JeffAdamsWrites.com.
And I'm Will from WillKnaus.com. This week's episode is sponsored in part by listeners just like you. We'll have more information on how you can help support the show in just a few minutes. Well, here we are.
Here we are.
Another week, another podcast episode.
Yay!
You've got some news.
Wigger 3 finished this week. Yay! First draft is done. Rolling right into the editing because it's due on December 1st. So that'll be where I spend the next few weeks working on that. But yeah, it's done. Yay! Good. I was pleased that, because I keep talking about how the dictation is up to my word count. Mm-hmm. I did, in 9 writing days in November, I managed to generate just under 20,000 words, like 19,500. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited about that. And so far, I've edited 6.5 chapters, and it's not too bad cleaning up the dictation so far. So, yay.
Good news.
I'm excited about that. Yeah. Good. There's lots of news bouncing around this week.
Well, fill us in.
The Kindle celebrated its 10-year anniversary, which is pretty amazing. It doesn't feel like it's been 10 years since the Kindle rolled out. And, wow, I have a hard time remembering not reading a book on a tablet anymore. Even though I still really love physical books and will occasionally read physical books. But it revolutionized, of course, everything, because it really helped so many writers have a way to get their work out when Amazon opened KDP. Mm-hmm. I think a year after the Kindle came out, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. So yeah, happy birthday, Kindle.
Yeah. I remember buying our first Kindle. It was several $100s.
It was.
But well worth it. Got to read and experience a lot of great books that I wouldn't have been to otherwise. And congratulations to Amazon, Kindle, and the industry itself that was revolutionized by this one technological advancement.
Yeah, it's pretty epic. I remember that we were hesitant to buy a Kindle too. Like, I think we bought our parents' Kindles before we bought our own. Because we were so into physicals.
No, we had one.
We did? All right.
We tried it out.
I'll take your word for that.
Yeah.
Audible also had big news this week as they launched a subscription program called the Audible Romance Package. Mm-hmm. This is very much like you might have with like Netflix or with Kindle Unlimited if you subscribe into those. Gives you access to, they say, thousands of romance titles for a flat rate. It's $6.95 for Audible members, or $14.95 if you're not a member. And you get to choose categories, character types, story themes. I think it's interesting that they've given this access to take me to the good parts, where you can shuttle right off to the first meeting, the first kiss, the proposal, trouble spots, etc. And a number of gay romance titles are in here also. There is an LGBT category amongst the categories. And I've seen books from Z.A. Maxfield, Serena Bowen, Mary Calmay, Andrew Gray. Dreamspinner does have some of their older titles in as this gets going. And it'll be interesting to see how this grows over time. And of course, not a surprise they would pick romance to do this the first time with, because romance is such a ginormous category. Mm-hmm. So congratulations to Audible. If anybody out there does the Audible program, we'd love to hear from you, because we have not taken the plunge on that quite yet. But if you're doing it, or you do pick up doing it, drop us a line. We'd like to know how it kind of works and how some of those things like get to the good parts works for your reading experience.
Cool. Now, as we mentioned in the opening of this week's episode, we've got a brand new paperback giveaway to talk about.
Ta-da!
We're going to be giving away 3 paperbacks from P.D. Singer's Mountain series. And it's worth noting that this will be for our U.S. listeners only. Now, go to biggayfictionpodcast.com/holiday to get your chance to win, and the giveaway runs through Sunday, December 9th.
Yes.
We'll have a little more information on this giveaway later in the show.
Indeed we will.
So, also, we would like to thank and welcome our newest patron, Rachael. Hello, Rachael. Welcome to the family.
Hi, Rachael.
Now, you can help support the Big Gay Fiction Podcast with a monthly pledge through Patreon. And for as little as 25 cents an episode, your pledge helps pay for the costs of producing and distributing this podcast. And for fans who pledge at the silver and gold levels, you'll have the exclusive opportunity to ask questions of our upcoming guests. And all patrons also have the option to have a personalized thank you sent directly to them. Now, any month that we have pledges that cover our monthly production costs, we'll produce a bonus episode, especially for our patrons, and we'll be recording the November bonus imminently.
Yes, right after we're done with this episode.
Exactly. Now, you can get all the details on how to become a patron at our Patreon page. Just go to patreon.com/biggayfictionpodcast. That's patreon.com/biggayfictionpodcast.
Your favorite new YA hero has arrived with Tracker Hacker by Jeff Adams, the first book in the Codename Winger series. At 16, Theo Reese is the youngest agent for tactical operational support. His way with computers makes him invaluable. He designs new gadgets, helps agents, including his parents, in the field, and works to keep the TOS network safe. But when a hacker breaches the system TOS uses to track agents, Theo is put to the test like never before. Thrust from behind the safety of his desk, Theo must go into the field to put a stop to the hack. He's scared, but resolved because one of the missing agents is his father. And just to make it more interesting, he has to keep everything a secret from his boyfriend and teammates. Can Theo get the job done, save his dad, and make things good with his boyfriend? Find out in Tracker Hacker by Jeff Adams, available in ebook and paperback from Harmony Ink Press, Amazon.com, and other online retailers.
So last week we brought ourselves out of a reading drought, as it were, with several reviews. And this week you have several more. It's like you've had books just raining all over you or something.
Yeah, I'm soaking wet in literature. Yes, I think November has become my unofficial catch-up month. Not catch-up the condiment, but catching up with all of my reading. Trying to whittle down that TBR pile before the end of the year. The first book I want to talk about is a holiday novella called Hot Mall Santa by A.J. Truman. Now, Hot Mall Santa obviously takes place during the holidays, and our hero is Tom. He works at the decor store, which is sort of a... It's essentially like Pier 1.
Okay.
Imagine an upscale decor store in a mall. And that's where he has been slaving away the last couple of years. And he has got a crush on his store manager, and he keeps trying to push for the assistant manager position because he does all the work of an assistant manager. This year during the holidays, the mall decides to go non-traditional with its choice of Santa Claus, and they hire a hot, muscled stud to sit in Santa Claus's village and take all gift requests from young and old alike. Now, Hot Mall Santa catches everyone's attention, including Tom's. They meet. They say hi once or twice. They run into one another, and they actually end up having lunch together. There's a secret, abandoned security office with a two-way window that overlooks the food court. That's Tom's sort of secret lunch spot. And one day he goes up to the abandoned office and finds Hot Mall Santa there. So they eat their lunch together, and they actually have a pleasant conversation, and they get to know one another.
Nice. And
Tom begins to realize there is actually a lot going on underneath all those good looks and sexy muscles. And they continue to know one another and get to run into one another during the holidays. And in fact, after one incredibly busy day, they actually run into one another at a rundown old gay bar. and they talk, and they flirt, and they end up going home to with one another. And so then begins their fantastic holiday affair. In between bouts of shopper fatigue, they continue to know one another. Randall, which is Hot Mall Santa's name, becomes a local celebrity. The local news picks up on all the long lines that are happening at the mall to visit Hot Santa. And I really, really enjoyed this book. Not only is it fun and sexy, which are sort of trademarks of A.J. Truman's style, I thought it was really genuine and interesting how they sort of, over the course of the book, our two heroes kind of really genuinely get to know one another. And Tom learns about Randall's slightly difficult history. He's kind of a vagabond. He just kind of goes from one place to another. He's a young guy kind of in search of himself. And this Santa gig is really just one stop on his sort of never-ending adventure. So they have to come to grips with the idea that once the holiday season is over, their time together is most likely going to be over because Randall's going to move on. Of course, he doesn't. They end up getting together with a happy holiday ending. So I really recommend Hot Mall Santa. I really enjoyed it an awful lot.
Nice.
The next book I want to talk about is Line in the Sand, which is the second book in the Herx Merx series by Ari McKay. Now, a couple of months ago, I reviewed the first book in this series, and I loved that book to pieces. My opinion of the second book is identical. God, I really love this book. Okay, A Line in the Sand is about Alec. He is the bodyguard, and he is tasked to guard the attractive body of John, who is a popular actor. Alec begins his assignment on Broadway, where John is wrapping up a production of Macbeth. He then follows John to a convention and movie premiere. John finds himself suddenly famous because a movie that he starred in last year suddenly took off unexpectedly. And they hence shot the sequel, and they kind of go the rounds doing publicity for this new picture. So through all of that, they of course get to know one another. They're instantly attracted to one another, but Alec is a professional, and he tries to keep things very, very professional. But that's very hard because John is so very attractive and so very charming. So while they're on a break from the publicity for this new movie, John goes on a little mini vacation to a jungle resort, and they kind of relax a little bit and decompress before they head to Europe for the next leg of the promotion. And they go on a river kayak tour. Yes, they hop in a kayak and go on the river, but unexpectedly there is some weather, and they are washed downstream by this sudden storm surge. And they're left stranded in the middle of the Central American jungle. And it's Alex's job to get them out alive. John falls gravely ill, and it's at this point, we've got a lot of hurt comfort themes going on. It's at this point that Alec realizes that his feelings for John are certainly far more than professional. And if they get out of this situation alive, he's going to make sure that they make every moment count. Eventually, they are, of course, rescued, and John recovers, and they live happily ever after, which isn't giving anything away. This is a romance novel. So I highly recommend this second book in the Herx Merx series, A Line in the Sand. I really, really enjoy. I love this series so much so far. I can't wait to read the other ones.
Nice.
So maybe in a couple of months, another book will be coming your way. Okay.
And I think I need to read that series too, because
It's really,
It's so good.
Really, really good. I like it a whole lot. Okay, so the next book I want to talk about is Call Me By Your Name, the book by Andre Aciman. It is the gay lit novel. Now, some of you probably know, you certainly know, that I avoid literary fiction like the plague.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it to pieces. But I decided to give this book a try because the movie that was based on this particular book is coming out this holiday season. And I wanted to check it out and see what was what. So, Call Me By Your Name is essentially the story of Elio, our young protagonist. His parents are academics, and they live in this house in a small Italian village. And every year they invite a student or I can't think of another word. Like a visiting professor or something to come do a residency in their house, so they can work on whatever their dissertation or their manuscript or whatever. So this summer, a guy from the U.S. named Oliver has come to work on his book. He also is getting pieces of it translated. He works with the translator that's in the village nearby. And Elio is immediately taken with Oliver because he's so intelligent and attractive. And though there's about a 7-year age gap between them, they're intellectually equals because Elio has grown up in this, highly literary intellectual environment. His parents essentially have, salons where local academics come and they talk and drink grappa and they talk about philosophy and all sorts of crap like that. Anyway, so Elio is really book smart, but emotionally he's working through an awful lot trying to understand his new obsession for this man that kind of comes into their life. Mm-hmm. The book is told in first-person narrative, and it's essentially Elio's stream of consciousness over the summer, what he's thinking and what he's doing with this handsome new visitor. So when it comes to literary fiction, your mileage may vary. I vacillated back and forth between loving this book and hating it to pieces. Because occasionally you gotta wade through an awful lot of gobbledygook. The sort of masturbatory stuff that they would, not the good kind of masturbation, the sort of literary masturbation that would be discussed in, college classes about the lyricism of the prose, that kind of thing. There's a lot of that to get through, but underneath all of that junk, there's a pretty decent story. There are little interesting vignettes about Elio and Oliver and how they interact over the summer. They eventually do get together, and it's about the romance in the final days before Oliver has to leave. I mean, their time together is finite. Once the summer ends, the story moves forward, and it kind of briefly covers their lives as individuals and how their paths diverge. And at the end of the book, they come back together. The story essentially comes full circle when Oliver returns to the Italian villa about 20 years later. And they kind of see, what their lives have become. So I thought this book was okay. I am still looking forward to the movie. James Ivory of Merchant Ivory is the one who wrote the screenplay for Call Me By Your Name. And he is kind of an expert at taking literary fiction and turning it into compelling narrative set in beautiful English and European locations. That's sort of his jam. Remember the Merchant Ivory movies back in the 80s, the Ian Forrester adaptations. So I'm still looking forward to this movie, despite my sort of feelings for the book itself. So Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman. Give it a try if you want. That's my recommendation.
That's a 3-star review, I think.
Kinda. Maybe 2.5. We'll, yeah. Anyway.
So I also did a book this week. I stepped away from LGBT literature for a moment and listened to the new John Green book called Turtles All the Way Down.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wait, before you go on. Well, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. One last thing. I did listen to Call Me By Your Name on audiobook. It is read by Armie Hammer, one of the stars of the film. I do recommend that. I thought Armie did a really nice job.
Cool.
Okay, now continue.
Okay.
So you were listening to the new John Green book.
Yes.
That's where we left off.
And it's interesting because I really loved The Fault in Our Stars.
That's
blah,
it.
Blah, blah, blah. And I love his collaboration with David Levithan, with Will Grayson. And yet, I've never read other John Green books despite owning them. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things you have a TBR that's longer than you can deal with.
Yep.
But I jumped on Turtles because it's the follow-up to Fault, and let's see what John's going to do now. It's extraordinary, and it really broadens out. I felt that Fault in Our Stars was really kind of a tightly done story that really focused on Hazel and Gus and their illness and finding each other. Turtles has I feel like a broader palette that it's working with. Your central character is Asa, a 16-year-old high school student. We also have her best friend Daisy, who is a hoot. Reminds me a little bit of Heather from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, honestly. She writes Star Wars fanfic and is generally... she's the adventurous one, and Asa's a little more on the reserve side. Asa's also dealing with... she lost her father several years back. And she's never quite recovered from that. She keeps his cell phone so she can flip through the photos on it, for example. Mm-hmm. Despite the fact that they've all been downloaded to the family computer now, it's his phone, and she needs that phone. She lives with some sort of a mental condition. She always feels like she's got this tightening little spiral of thoughts going on in her head that just pull her from being in a good place and having a good time with people to, it's essentially, without giving too much, I don't want to give away the story itself, but think of like, you left the stove on at home. No, you really left the stove on at home. You really need to go look and make sure you didn't leave the stove on. Those kind of things pick at her brain all the time, and it's usually something to do with her physical health that she's dealing with. At the same time, there's this mystery of a disappeared millionaire businessman that's happened, and Asa happens to know the son of that businessman because they both went to what she terms sad camp years ago because he lost his mother around the same time that she'd lost her father. And so she resumes this friendship with Davis because initially they're trying to figure out what happened to the father because there's a reward. And Daisy kind of pushes her out to do that. But as she gets to reconnect with Davis and know his younger brother Noah, she really can't push too hard to solve that mystery because of what it will mean to them. Mm-hmm. So there's so many things here with Asa dealing with trying to control her mental condition so that she can, because she really wants to have a good time. She really wants to be Davis's girlfriend potentially and to know him, but yet every time they kind of pull close, she's pulled away by this anxiety that she's got. I'm not doing all this a lot of justice because I also don't want to take away some of the twists and turns in this book. But I was blown away by how John Green constructed how he wrote her, especially Asa's conversations with her inner demons. The audiobook is narrated by Kate Rudd, and she did an amazing job of tweaking Asa's voice just enough for her inner voice to be kind of this like scary voice that's coming after her to get her to do things. And the mystery that goes on with the businessman and trying to sort that out, and just how Asa tries to navigate maybe having a relationship with Davis and Daisy going off and maybe having a boyfriend. I'm babbling. I will leave you with the fact that this book truly blew me away. It has all of the feels that Fault did, because you will laugh and you will sob and you will feel everything for Asa and what she's going through in her life. It's really a tremendous book, and I think John Green has proven once again that he's truly a master of YA fiction that digs deep in the reality of teenagers. So he's not writing teenagers that are in the Hunger Games or dealing with vampires or even secret agents like what I write. He's writing the teenager that could live next door to you and what they're going through in their particular life. So I highly recommend it. The audiobook is awesome. Kate Rudd, big thumbs up for both. She does a great job with all of the characters. And I in particularly love Daisy. She just comes across with such a buoyant personality that it was very cool. So thumbs up to that.
Cool.
Yeah. So a little music talk.
Okay.
Because we haven't done that in a long time, because neither one of us buys a lot of music.
That's very true.
Kelly Clarkson has come out in the last couple of weeks with a tremendous album called Meaning of Life. I found it like she was channeling a little bit of Christina Aguilera in some of the arrangements, which I liked a lot, because that kind of music I think really lends itself to Kelly's big voice and what she can do with it. And it's also very kind of rock soul, I think I would call it, in the song selections. So she really gets to kind of rock and wail on some of these songs, and I loved it. I've been listening to it on and off over the past couple of weeks as I got it, and just loved it to pieces. What did you think of it? Because we've had one listen to it together.
I've only managed to listen to it a couple of times. I was listening to it last weekend while we were putting up some Christmas decor. Yes, we put it up early. I don't know if here's the thing. I don't think I experience music the way most people do. I very, very seldom listen to lyrics. It's really more about the energy and the tempo of the song that I get into. So that's sort of my thing. That being said, I really enjoyed what I listened to. It will probably take a couple of more listens, like conscious listens, for me to kind of get what the album is about, or what the individual songs are like trying to quote unquote say. So but I love Kelly Clarkson to pieces. I always have, and I really enjoy this album. What I've listened to so far. Yeah.
Cool. The other one I want to mention is an album by I believe his name is Kyle Riabko. I think is how you pronounce his last name. I talked about him a while back on the podcast because he had an album out called Backrack Reimagined, where he took a lot of Burt Bacharach songs and kind of restructured the arrangement into a very acoustical, kind of jazzy thing, and I loved it to death. He's got a new album out called now Richard Rodgers Reimagined, and he takes a lot of Richard Rodgers show tunes and does the same kind of tweak to them. He's got such the voice for these songs as well, because he is musically theater trained. His take on my favorite things from Sound of Music has a bit of a rock guitar vibe in it, which is really an interesting take on it. And his Blue Moon and My Funny Valentine I found completely, just enchanting and kind of otherworldly almost, because of the way that he slowed them down. So, highly recommend that. I'll find some nice links for YouTube for both Kelly's album and for Kyle's.
Cool.
So that we can give our listeners a little sample out there.
Awesome. And
of course, Kelly's also been mentoring The Voice recently too, which was awesome. I think she's going to be a great coach coming up in season 14 in the winter. They're headed to the lives week after next. So the week of Thanksgiving, they'll start doing the lives for The Voice. And I'm really into Noah Mack. I hope he survives the knockouts or the playoffs or whatever it's called that's happening this week. His Hold Back the River, I loved it. His low notes are just some of the most awesome things I've heard in songs lately. Ezra Tualo?
Ezra Tuolo, who gained fame a couple of years ago. He came out after his time in the NFL, and he has been nailing it every single performance so far this season on The Voice. I really, really like him.
Yeah, I hope he survives playoffs too. And Chloe Kowansky, I think is her last name. She crushed it with a version of Fleetwood Mac's "Landslide" a couple weeks ago. So she's also one of my top favorites to get through. Have you been feeling about The Voice this season?
I'm very, very positive about this season. Last year, I felt the energy was a little low. The talent certainly wasn't. As always, the people who made it to the lives were every single one of them were perfectly spectacular. But I felt the energy from the judges and from the show itself was sort of like kind of lagging a little bit. I don't know. I didn't feel the energy was, as pumped up and as high as it should be. The energy has returned, I think, this season.
I think Jennifer Hudson had a lot to do with that, too.
Jennifer Hudson and Miley Cyrus are back, and they certainly gave the show a well-needed injection of life. Not that Blake and Adam aren't perfectly lovely. They're lovely every single season, but I think this season has rebounded and is incredible. Awful lot of fun. Yeah,
absolutely.
Hiking through the woods in search of the perfect Christmas tree, sipping homemade hot cocoa in front of a crackling fire, enjoying the company of gathered friends and loved ones.
It's definitely the most wonderful time of year, and we've got the books that will keep you turning pages on those long winter nights.
Announcing the Big Gay Fiction Podcast's Happy Holiday Paperback Giveaway.
We're giving you a chance to win 3 terrific books from the Mountain series by author P.D. Singer.
The prize pack includes paperback copies of Snow on the Mountain, Fall Down the Mountain, and Return to the Mountain.
To enter, go to the show notes page for this episode at biggayfictionpodcast.com or visit the official giveaway page at biggayfictionpodcast.com/holiday.
If you can't get enough of stories filled with love, self-discovery, and the great outdoors, then you're not going to want to miss this. Go to biggayfictionpodcast.com/holiday before the rafflecopter ends on Sunday, December 9th. Now, earlier this week, you had the chance to talk to J. Scott Coatsworth, friend of the podcast. Boy, does he have a lot of stuff going on.
Oh my God, it's crazy. He's got a new book out called The Stark Divide.
Yeah.
And as we talked, we find out about that book, of course, but we find out what he's got coming up as an author over the next year. Mm-hmm. His production schedule is crazy, but then he also runs Queer SciFi, Queer Romance Inc., and he's starting a blog tour service to help, especially those in the sci-fi genre, find the right places to go. Mm-hmm. It's quite incredible. So let's listen to Scott. Today we welcome J. Scott Coatsworth back to the podcast. Scott writes stories that subvert expectations, that seek to transform traditional sci-fi, fantasy, and contemporary worlds into something new and unexpected. Along with his husband Mark, he also runs both Queer SciFi and Queer Romance Inc., sites designed to bring people like us together to promote and celebrate fiction that reflects our own reality. His latest book, The Stark Divide, was released in October. Welcome back, Scott.
Oh, thanks. Good to talk to you.
I love that last line in the intro I just did about bringing people like us together to promote and celebrate fiction that reflects our reality. That's really good.
Well, thank you. It's been a big part of what I wanted to do is find and then promote community in the LGBT and also sci-fi community.
Tell us about The Stark Divide, your brand new book that's just only been out a month.
Sure. Like I said, I brought props here. Stark Divide.
Yeah. If you're on the video, you got to see the very cool book cover.
Well, thank you. This book actually has a long history to it. When I first was writing seriously back in my 20s, I had written a book called On the Shoreless Sea. And it was about this world that was a cylinder, and it was a self-contained world. And it was basically a generation ship going from here to someplace else. But it devolved into where it essentially was a fantasy type world in space. And I really loved the feeling of the story in that, but it went out to about 10 publishers, and all of them rejected it. And that was kind of my swan song as an author at that time. I just kind of gave up for a long time. when I came back to it seriously in 2013, 2014, I really still wanted to go back to the story, but I knew that one, my writing was not up to snuff anymore because I hadn't written in so long, and two, that the story itself needed a lot of work. So I thought, I really don't know where this world came from, how it was created. So I went back and decided to tell the story of when it first became a world, when it was created by mankind. And it started out with a story called Seedling, which is about this giant seed that's towed out to an asteroid in space and basically starts to devour it and become the world. And there were two other stories that followed that essentially became this long, epic sci-fi tale told about 20, 25 years. So for me, it really is kind of a cool thing in that it's one of my oldest projects, but it's also my newest. So it's really going back to what I loved to read when I was that age and still enjoy, but also what I'd started so long ago, and now I'm actually kind of bringing to completion after all these years.
What was your inspiration for it?
When I used to read books like Anne McCaffrey's Pern, they always had neat things like the thread, right? In this other world, and the stuff comes down. And so when I started writing sci-fi worlds, I tried to give each one a unique characteristic. So like in the story that eventually became my Oberon series, it's this half world out in space. In this one, I wanted to do something different. So I wanted a world that was going to be, again, that kind of fantasy sci-fi crossover feel, but also it's got this bioluminescent plant life on the world. So every morning, instead of having sunlight, because you're out in the middle of a void, you have this light, this world lights up and then goes dark. And I didn't know why that was when I first wrote it. I just knew that was my really cool hook that I was going to use. And again, that's when I went back and I figured out, oh, the whole world's alive. And that's how it comes about. But so that was kind of the inspiration, was to do something that would give the world itself a unique flavor and character in the story.
Mm-hmm. What would you say how your writing evolved over the time between when you stopped with it and then picked it back up, and how did the story itself change? Did you make a lot of changes, or was it just kind of sprucing it up, so to speak?
Well, I'm going to answer it two ways. The writing itself, I really was very rusty, like I said, when I came back to writing. So I started with short stories and kind of worked my way back up again. But I had this idea in my 30s that I really was going to not be able to be a great writer until I reached my 40s, because I would have that much more life experience behind me and things to draw on that I just didn't have when I was in my 20s. But as far as the story itself, it actually isn't the original story yet, although we will get to that original story. I'm not sure if it's going to be this trilogy or if it will be after the trilogy that I'm working on, but it's a prequel. So it's an entirely new story that I wrote over the last few years. But it does explain, for my 2 or 3 people that actually read that other one before I sent it off, it explains how that came about. And it sets me up to retell that story eventually. But I think it's going to be an entire rewrite, just right from scratch, because so much has changed and I've got such a better understanding of what the world is about now, that I can really write it in a much different way than I could have in my 20s and what I did write. Mm-hmm. A lot more richness, I think, to it.
And who are the characters that we get to meet?
So there's a rotating cast of characters because it's told over these 3 different time periods. You have the original 3 characters. Colin is the starship captain, and Jackson is the engineer, and Anna is the scientist on the ship that are basically taking the seed out. There's a mishap during that voyage, and it almost doesn't happen. But as you go on, you get to see those characters move on to the next phase, and you start to see other characters come in, and like the kids of those characters. And so it kind of weaves through. The thing I really like about it is you get to see, kind of fast forward and see what happened to those people in the next space of time. So it's in the one book, you kind of get these 3 different snapshots of what's going on in their lives instead of just getting the one book and then being done and then waiting for 6 months or a year for the next thing to come out. So, but they do all kind of weave together, and then I add new characters as it goes.
And you've hinted at the series, and then Stark Divide is the first book in the Liminal Skies series.
Right.
What else is coming in that series? Is that just the first piece of this trilogy, or how does this all lay itself out?
Yeah, there's 3 different books. I've basically got the second book is done now. It's out in beta read. So it does go forward another 15 years or so, and you see a lot of things happen. Part of the story revolves around religion and artificial intelligence and how those things interact, and how something that's made by man can be divine. And so you kind of get into a little bit more of that. But there's a lot that happens in the second book. Things really change quite a bit and set the stage for eventually getting to this point where you don't have the same technology in the world, although the world itself is technological. You get to a point that it's gradually approaching more of a fantasy sort of basis over time. So the third book, I've got ideas about it. I haven't plotted it all out yet, but all three of them are set up the same way, where it's basically three novellas strung together, three epic pieces to kind of bring the whole thing together. So I have an idea where it's ending, where it's going, but I get back to that in about 4 or 5 months, and that's when I'll really kind of lay everything out.
Okay, very cool.
Thanks.
How would you describe your process for world building?
Ooh, yeah, again, a lot of it goes back to my sci-fi background. So if I'm writing romance, it tends to be more character driven. I'm looking at who the characters are and how they relate and what the stories are going to be. When I'm writing stuff that's more on the sci-fi side of things, although it often still, well, up to this point, always still has queer characters, it really is driven by the plot and by the world itself. And so I really do try to kind of think of, as a sci-fi reader, what would I like to see? What would be really cool to me to see? What kinds of things projecting in the future? There was a movie called Her that came out a couple years ago that was about a guy that fell in love with an artificial intelligence program. And it was just so really cool to me because it was so close to now. And yet it was such a great leap forward. You could see literally how we would get from here to there in a matter of 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so it just managed to kind of give you that really cool, this is coming kind of feeling. And I love kind of playing around with those things.
Nice. Now, kind of moving away from sci-fi a little bit, in October, you actually brought a close to your weekly series of River City Chronicles. What brought that to an end after 2 years of publishing weekly?
I'm kind of schizophrenic. I've got my romance and contemporary side, which almost always has a little magical realism in it, although not my Christmas story. I'll talk about that later. But yeah, it's something that I'd always planned to do an arc. So I'd always planned to have a certain number of chapters and then come to an end. I'm kind of following the Tales of the City model Armistead Maupin did, but just for Sacramento instead of San Francisco. And so when I started the story, I pretty much knew that each character had some kind of secret, and that during the course of the story, I was going to tell what those secrets were. And so by about chapter 90, 95, you get the last secret, and then things just kind of start to wrap up. So I think when I hit about chapter 75, I had kind of plotted out at that point what all the rest of the chapters were essentially going to be, and I made a couple changes just to make sure I got in a few things that I realized I hadn't picked up on, but I knew it was going to kind of come down to that ending. So my plan now on the current set is to take that and do a book out of it. It was translated into Italian as I went, so I'm working to see if I can find an Italian publisher since I've already got the manuscript ready to go. And I'll probably self-pub here in the U.S. And put it out in both paperback and ebook form. But I really want to try to target folks locally here because it is such a local story. There's so many places that people reading it here will recognize, and I think it's just really cool to write about Sacramento. It's kind of my love letter to Sacramento.
Fantastic. Since we're getting ready to move there, maybe we should just read all of River City so we know what we're getting into.
You get all the recommendations in one place. My favorite restaurants, coffee shops.
Now, you just dropped a hint about a Christmas story. What's that about? Because we are, of course, headed right into the holiday season right now.
I had a story last year that came out that was a sort of post-apocalyptic zombie Christmas. The last 2 guys alive on Earth. And that was fun to write. But this year I really decided I wanted to do something that just totally unlike me, had no zombies, no sci-fi, no future, just a sweet contemporary, and it's a short story, short love story. So I was listening to the song Save the Best for Last, Vanessa Williams. Mm-hmm. And that one always just grabs my heart. How could you basically be with me and tell me all the things that are important about you and then go back to this other person and just, not be with them in that way. And that really kind of tugged something at me. So when I wrote the story, it was about 2 characters, and one that is the one that is in love with the guy and the other guy that's with someone else and doesn't realize he's in love with him. So it was fun. It's set in San Diego, which is my first story there. And I just drew on our visits there and some of our friends for knowledge about the city. But it was a lot of fun to put together. So it's a sweet contemporary love story.
What's it called?
It's called I Only Want to Be With You. And it was somewhat influenced also by reacquainting ourselves with Ally McBeal and Vonda Shepard, mm-hmm. who was the version of that song. And yeah, it just kind of clicked. It's like, yeah, that's it. That's what it is.
And when's that coming out?
That'll be out, I think it's the 28th of December. They're doing a series of releases starting around the 1st, all the way through New Year's. And mine will be the second to the last one.
Okay, so we'll link people over to Mischief Corner so they can watch for that come out.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Angel Martinez has a book in there. I think there's about 10 or 12 altogether.
For people who want to find the Zombie Christmas, where can they find that one at?
So that one was published last year. That was in an anthology from Mischief Corner called This Wish Tonight. And it had, I think one was a contemporary, one was fantasy, and then mine was a sci-fi kind of dystopian. So
Cool.
that's still out from Mischief Corner.
We'll link people to that one too. So looking past the holidays and into next year, what's coming up next for you?
So I've got a lot coming up. We just, of course, had Stark Divide come out in October. The next one, after the Christmas one, will be Lander. And Lander is the sequel to Skythane in my Oberon Cycle series. That one is in edits. In fact, I just sent back the first edits about 2 days ago. So I've got the cover on that, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. If you guys have seen the Skythane cover, it's very similar to this, but it's got a really good-looking redhead Space Marine kind of guy. And the red tones and gold tones on it, just beautiful, by Anne Kane. So that's out in February. The next thing that I know the date, or the essential date on, is the one we're working on now, The Rising Tide, which is the Stark Divide sequel. And that'll be out in October of next year. But there's also a series, it's going to be a trilogy called Marionettes in the Mist, which comes from the other serial that I was doing with Mischief Corner. And that is with Tony Griffin, Angel Martinez, and Freddie McKay. And we finished that one up back in the summer of this last year. So that's going to be released as a 3-part series, a trilogy, essentially. And that'll be sometime in 2018, but I don't know what the date is yet. So those are everything that I've kind of got on deck besides River City. I'm going to get to the end of all this and finish the 2 trilogies and be like, I don't know what to do next. I'm just so much like lined up right now to get through, you know?
I suspect it'll come to you before you get to the end.
Well, I did email Lynn today and asked her when she wanted, at Dreamspinner, asked her when she wanted the next book in Oberon, the next book in Liminal Sky. And then I mentioned to her that, I will need to sit down and talk to her and figure out what to write next. And maybe it won't be a trilogy because they always tell you that trilogies don't sell. The second one never sells as well as the first one, and the third one never sells as well as the second one. So it might be a standalone something. I don't know. I've got a lot of stuff that I could kind of go into. So things I could expand or go back to one of these and just do a 1-book thing, or who knows?
Mm-hmm. You're a busy guy because, you've just laid out a lot of stuff coming out on the writer side.
Yes.
In 2018, but you also do, these other sites, and you're starting up a new service as well. Let's start with the one that I think everybody best knows you for. What's new over at Queer SciFi?
I'm glad you asked. Renewal. So this is a third of our contest books from the Flash Fiction Contest. It's actually the 4th contest, which gets kind of confusing. But the very first one that we did, it was called Endings, and we got 15 entries for it. And so there wasn't enough at that point to even consider doing a book. The second one was Discovery, the third one Flight, and now Renewal. And we basically give everybody a theme, and we say, you take this theme, take it however you want to, and give us a 300-word story. And it needs to be both queer representative, and it needs to also be speculative fiction, so sci-fi, fantasy, paranormal, horror. And then we go through them and read them and find the best ones. It's gotten better every year, and it's gotten more diverse every year. The first year we did 15 stories. The second year we had 110. The third year we had about 167, and this last year 207. And so just in terms of being able to select stories, it's gotten better. Mm-hmm. But we've also started to see more stories come in. We had one intersex one this year. We had a lot of transgender stories, some non-binary stories, some asexual stories. So we're kind of moving beyond just doing the male-male thing, although there's always still a lot of that because that's a very popular part of the genre. So that's the main first thing. We also, speaking of intersex, we had a really cool discussion yesterday on the site where one of our authors came in and just gave a talk about what intersex is and what it isn't. As a writer, if you're going to write an intersex character, what to write about, how it kind of works. And that's going to be up on the site in the form of a PDF sometime probably next week for people who if you want to read it as a writer, if you're just curious about what intersex people are like, how that comes about. And the last thing on Queer SciFi that I want to highlight is Ben Brock has been working on our reviewing side for a long time. But he's now pulling together a reviewing group of folks that is going to be taking a lot more requests. And so we should have a big review program in place in the next couple weeks. And so if you want to, or anybody else out there who's a writer wants to submit books that fall into the queer speculative fiction umbrella, if you go to queersci-fi.com and click on reviews, there's a form right there. You can submit that, and it'll get added to our queue for the reviewers to pick up. So that's kind of what we're working on right now.
Is Renewal out now for folks?
Yeah, Renewal came out about a month and a half ago.
Okay.
It's in ebook format. It's also in a regular paperback, and then this one is really cool because there's a color one that has all the illustrations in just gorgeous color.
Oh, amazing.
And the illustrators on those, I always forget one of them. So it's Rebecca Murray, Mila May, who did the cover last time for Flight, and Gus Lee. Gus did the cover this time as well.
Now, when we talked to you back in February at the Dreamspinner conference, we were chatting about Queer Romance Inc., which had just been on the cusp of, getting out there into the world at that point. How's that gone now that you're almost 10 months into it?
It's going really well. We just passed a 2,000 book mark on the site. Queer Romance Inc., for those who don't know, is basically a site. It was our reaction to the fall of ARE when ARE closed all romance ebooks, closed in December last year. But we didn't want to tackle the sales and the royalties part of it. With Mark and I, there's just no way we could do that kind of thing for hundreds and hundreds of authors and that many books. So we decided to make a site that just made it really easy to find exactly what you want in queer romance and books that feature queer characters. So that's what we focus on. It's got a lot of filters, ways to kind of get down to books, a lot of different breakdowns on the titles. We're almost up to 500 authors, probably hit that this month. And we're seeing between 13 and 20,000 visitors a month, which is good, but I want to see that continue to go up. So the next thing we're working on is to make the site more sticky, basically, if it's webmaster term or SEO term, I guess. Have reasons for readers to come back to the site again and again and again. Like on Facebook, you're always going in to check your messages and see if anybody's liked your stuff. And so we're going to try to build in some more reader interaction with the site without doing reviews, because we found on Goodreads, for instance, Goodreads is a fantastic resource. It's a very broad resource in terms of what they cover, but authors are scared to go on there because the reviews can just be so difficult to read. So we decided from the get-go that we weren't going to do reviews on the site because there's enough other places to get that. But we do want to make it easier for readers to come in and use the site and maybe mark books they like, put a TBR pile together, that kind of thing. Nice. So that's the piece of it that we're working on.
Cool. And, again, as if you don't do enough already, you're also now, in a soft launch phase on a blog tour service as well for authors. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we wanted to get more into author services. We kind of started with Queer Romance Inc., and I've done tours now for a couple of years, both for myself and for some friends of mine. And it just seemed like a natural way to go, especially given that there's not any blog tour company out there that I'm aware of that really gets into the sci-fi fantasy side of things specifically. It's not all that we're going to do. We're going to also just do general romance stuff. But we are going to have a specialty with working with sci-fi blogs and trying to get stuff out there beyond this really warm, fuzzy community that we have here in the queer romance and MMFF, et cetera, romance community, but really try to start pushing out into the mainstream sci-fi community as well. So that's kind of the thing that makes us unique, I think, among other sites, because there's at least 3 or 4 really good blog tour companies that I know of that are working in the romance space already. But we thought we could offer something a little bit different as well.
Now, for people who might want to check that out, what's the URL for that one?
Sure, it's Other Worlds Inc., INK, like Queer Romance Inc., INK. It's kind of our new brand thing, .com.
Cool. We'll definitely link up to that in the show notes so that the authors in the audience can go check that out. Cool.
Yeah, we just did a soft launch. We're doing one tour for an author right now to test out the site and the service. And we've got a couple more tours that we're going to be doing in tandem with each other, because ultimately we want to do multiple tours each week. So once we get past those, then we'll throw it open and start taking general tours from authors. But we're still kind of making sure we have all the processes down, and we're getting people set up in different mailing lists depending on what kind of book you're selling. Is it a romance? Is it not a romance? Is it a genre book, et cetera? So we can really try to target a bit where it's going so that folks don't get hit up, just with everything that's not relevant to them.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So what's the best way to keep up with you online as the author, Scott?
Sure. Well, you can find me at jscottcoatsworth.com. Really easy. I'm on Facebook also. I've got a Facebook page at facebook.com/jscottcoatsworth. And then Twitter, because Twitter doesn't like having long things. I could only fit JS Coatsworth, but it's Twitter at jscoatsworth.com. Sorry, just JS Coatsworth. That's one of those places to find me, and then you can get to the other ones from there.
All right. Well, we'll link up to all those in the show notes along with the new book and everything else we talked about. Thank you so much for hanging out with us for a little bit today.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun.
So yeah, now you know Scott Coatsworth is a busy guy. No doubts about that. But yeah, it was good to talk to him.
As always.
Yes.
Yes. I think that'll do it for this week's episode. Coming up next week in episode 111, Charlie Cochet will be here to talk about her new book in the Thirds series, which comes out next week.
Yes. I'm actually finally reading the first book in the third series. I'm only 10 books behind. And I'm wondering why I wasn't on this bandwagon sooner, frankly.
Exactly.
But yeah, looking forward to talking to her.
Awesome. So guys, remember, no matter where life takes you, the journey will always be sweeter if you have a book. Until next time, guys, keep turning those pages, and above all, keep reading.
For detailed show notes and the complete episode backlist, go to biggayfictionpodcast.com. New episodes are available every Monday on all major podcast distributors and YouTube. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.